4, 3, 2.
Welcome everybody to the February 25th meeting of the Milton School Committee. We will begin by starting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Nice to have so many people here. It's great to have an engaged community, so I appreciate all of you coming. Tonight, we're going to be rearranging our agenda, and we have postponed some items to future meetings because of the snowstorm, and the staff wasn't able to get in. So the preliminary approval for the Milton High School field trip to Europe, the Early Literacy Initiative update, and the Facilities Advisory Committee update will move to March 11th. Facilities was canceled due to a snowstorm. Tonight, we also are doing something different. We will first present the FY27 budget information first, followed by Citizen Speak to allow for public comment regarding the most recent budget information. So we had some discussion this morning. We had not been able to have any school committee or finance committee conversations immediately following the initial presentation. We were able to speak this morning, but we wanted to have the opportunity to have any conversation and comments reflective of the most recent updates and comments from the committee. So we will do public comment following the budget discussion, and then we'll continue the rest of our agenda, which will be the superintendent's report, the chair's report, approving of vendor warrants, approving of minutes, and discussing the next items on the agenda. So with that, John, I will turn it over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Welcome everyone to our school committee meeting on February 25th. I'm going to ask Member Mark Loring to put up the presentation that we presented to the community at Finance prior to the February recess, which I think was on February 11. Over the course of February break, we had some meetings with our elementary principals, and we had a meeting as recently as yesterday with our full leadership team. And we also had finance committee this morning. So the presentation that we generated on February 7th for finance has been upgraded a little bit. We've also received feedback from families through phone calls and emails, both to the school committee and to me as your superintendent. And in listening to that feedback, we wanted to make sure that we presented any updates to you that would be maybe worth hearing prior to public speak, so you wouldn't, you'd be able to take that into consideration when you make your comments later on after this. So before we actually start the presentation, and I led with this morning at Finance, I can absolutely understand why people are here today or have been emailing related to the concern that when you just receive a list of reductions, that list looks harsh to some of our students that we work with that are our most vulnerable students and families. It was heavy in its reductions in areas of special education and some of our DEI position work. And that feedback that we took in over the last 2 weeks was very thoughtful. We heard it. I thought about it, and we presented something a little different today to make sure that we were being very cognizant of the feedback from the community. We have tonight's meeting to present what we're doing a little differently, and we're presenting also a rationale that goes along with some of these realignments and reductions. We'll have an open budget meeting at our next meeting that folks will also have an opportunity to comment again before the budget's voted. And we're trying to squeeze in a PTO budget night where I will host at the high school and just have an open forum on the budget as well. All of those will be opportunities for folks to provide feedback. So with that in mind, we're going to walk through the presentation as it was presented last week, and then at the end, we'll let people know the different renditions of that has changed between February 7th and today, February 25th. So I ask for your patience a little bit. We'll walk through it. Some of you may have seen this already at Finance or watched that meeting from the 7th. So we'll go through it at a pretty medium clip, but anybody can ask questions at the end, and we'll get through this so you can ask any question through your comments at public speak. All right, so today we have the presentation for the 25th at the school committee meeting. The agenda that is behind me reflects the different pages and different subjects that we'll be talking about. throughout tonight. And then we'll also be adding the updated reductions and realignments as well that were discussed this morning at our finance meeting. What you're seeing on the next page is the timeline. A lot of folks have been asking the question, how did we get here when we thought we had an override that took care of all this? And I'm not sure everybody's starting in how they're approaching the budget, but it is important to note that we started the budget process back in October 15th, where we talked with the town administrator and the finance committee. We wanted to get a timeline on when we needed to submit our budget, what that would look like. On the 19th of November, we did submit a level service budget of 5.2%, which was significantly below the last 2 years, but in line with the average over the last 20 years for the Milton Public Schools and most school districts across the state. And then we presented that level service budget information to the town administrator. So leading into November, even after the Thanksgiving break and leading into December, we thought that we had a rollover budget that we would be able to look at, make our necessary realignments, and then move the district in a way that we thought was good for children and teachers. So while we were in that mindset, we had a budget philosophy that we were going to utilize in order to make those budget decisions. On the next slide, thank you, Mark. Right off the bat in early fall, we wanted to make sure that we were long-term budget sustainable as a district. And you'll see some slides tonight that will show how that's been a challenge in the district over the last few years. It's very important for us to be able to know that the funds that we're getting from the override and the revenue that we're getting from the town is consistent with the amount of needs that we have as a district and the expenses that we have as a school department. We also wanted to prioritize our number one priority this year was strengthening the classroom instruction. Tier 1, every student in front of grade level work in front of their teacher. It's very important. We've been doing a lot of good inclusion work in the district over the past few years. Seeing that happen in our learning walks has been fantastic. And doing what we can to enhance that Tier 1 instruction is very important for the students' success. We also wanted to make sure that we were actively addressing student learning gaps, as we have been doing this year, and in future years we will do the same, and also improve the school, district, and the culture of each school and climate throughout the district. So with that said, the next slide shows where we thought we were when we were presenting our budget in the fall. What you can see is the traditional document that walks us from the current final point of the FY26 budget of $72,873,000. And you can see each cost category and what it costs and what the percentage increases are and how we get to the 5.2% final number. So just in salaries alone, when we roll our staff over, there's an increase just in the salary line of $3,322,000. Salary line is 81% of our budget. Our non-salary line is about 19% of our budget. So obviously, that is a substantial increase, and that alone is about 4.56%. The increases to other lines are about $26,000 to salaries increases and adjustments to substitutes and coverage, which we had challenges with in our last few budgets. Revenue offsets for the budget and the decreases to Medicaid and IDEA. That's kind of a budgeting function. It's a negative number because it's an offset. Special education increases for out-of-district tuitions would be, at that point in time, $259,000, which would be about a 7.78 increase. Special education contracted services, as well as transportation, was a 4.9% increase. Transportation increases in non-salary accounts, yellow school bus, foster care transportation, and homeless would go up by 5%, and facilities would be increased by 5%, bringing the total to 5.2%. So again, this was basically rolling every staff member over, adjusting some of our expenses that are non-salary based on some of the contracts we have with our yellow school buses and other vendors that we work with. And I thought, and we all thought we were coming in at 5.2%. That would have been a $3,788,000 increase, or 5.2% for the next coming school year. And again, very much in line with what the average is over the last 20 years in Milton. The updated timeline came to our attention in December that the revenue projections and the expense projections had a far gap that we needed to support and be connected to on behalf of the town. After discussing that situation with the town administrator, we asked for a meeting with the finance committee of the select board And that meeting was on January 7th, and that's when the $2.1 million deficit was discussed. And we began to address that, began to communicate that to staff and families, and also began the conversation of political body to political body and town administrator to superintendent. How can we bring that number down? Our goal on January 7 was to do the best we could to reduce the impact on next year's budget, but also really hone in on the fact that the formula for the town moving forward after the override was that the schools in the town would only grow by 3% a year. I just want to pause for a second there. That's a big shift in what we've seen in the district for a long time. If the average is 5.2 over the last 20 years, and over the last several years we've had up to 8, going all the way down to a 3% increase was a substantial change in practice that we had to really reconcile and have good conversations about. And I want to thank Nick Milano and Amy Dexter for being open about having those conversations. We've done, I think, a lot of good work in the meantime, and the school committee and the select board and members of the warrant committee have done so as well. As you can see from the timeline, we brought that shortfall for the schools only from 2.1 down to 1.4 on January 27, and we brought that revenue shortfall down from 1.4 million to $1,049,000. That was the number that we finally settled on that we would move forward with, and start to begin to finally make the decisions about how we would approach the budget between what we would reduce in non-salary areas of our budget and also reductions to salary, because that's 80% of our budget. When we had that final number, that's when we brought this presentation to the school committee and finance back on February 11th. The next slide, basically, the other part of the why are we here and what brought us here and what the recent history is that in FY24, which is 2 school years ago, the school year 2023-24 was short by $3.8 million. And that, shortfall had to be remedied by the use of one-time money, meaning money that's not coming back into the budget every year to support these budget lines. $800,000 in emergency circuit breaker relief, $1 million in reserve circuit breaker, $600 in Medicaid reserves, $500 in community schools reserves, $500,000 in food service, and $400,000 in one-time ARPA money from the federal government. That $3.8 million was an infusion of one-time money. That means that money wasn't going to be part of the budget in the following year. When we go into FY25, which was the school year prior to this, 2024-25, it wasn't a surprise that there would be a gap in that school year in the funding because there was really no major shift in the revenue and there was no shift in the expenses. The expenses actually got larger. So coming to grips with the shortfall that we had last school year, I believe started somewhere in January, where hiring was frozen, certain purchases were frozen. And Katie Blake identified the gap, brought it to the warrant committee and the school committee, as well as the select board. And all the town partners worked again in order to try to bring an override to a successful vote, which they did, and we're thankful. But also additional one-time money and some reductions that needed to be made at the end of last year going into the school year we're in right now. That required another $1 million request from the warrant committee in June. And it also required, thankfully, what we call in our work a 5th quarter payment from the governor through circuit breaker, which isn't always given out each year. It just means that circuit breaker happened to have a few more dollars in it, and they redispersed that leftover money to all the municipalities in a ratio or a formula that also helped us close the gap. Without that $1 million and without that added circuit breaker payment in July, we would not have been able to close out the books in FY25. So that 2-year gap and the making of that gap impacts the year that we're in right now, and also impacts the year that we're going to have next year, and probably impacts the next one after that. Just like your home budget, if you're relying on one-time money to pay things like your mortgage and your car payments, and that one-time money is no longer available, you're having a hard time paying those bills. And all these are bills that we have to pay. So we go to the next slide just to do a quick analysis in how we were thinking of this while we approached FY26. I can say that, first of all, thank you to the community of Milton. I live in the community. I voted for the override. I'm happy to pay that tax bill to make sure that our schools have what they need. We also recognized very early on when I arrived on June 1st that even with the override funds, that we were worried that we didn't have the amount of dollars in reserves that we need as a school department to make sure our balance sheet is an appropriately funded budget. So when we started to think about reducing the budget, we paused and we waited for some of the vacancies to come about like they do every year. People retire, people go to a different district, people take a year off. And so we decided not to fill some of those positions. And we took those dollars and we put them into circuit breaker and transportation revolving accounts. We also leveled out things like athletics, other areas of the budget that had not been budgeted accordingly. And I want to be really clear, there were budget lines in our budget that were identified by Katie in the spring last year that had not been budgeted to the projected amount used. So there's a term budget to actuals. If I know that my utility bill is $500,000, but I only budget $300,000, I can certainly expect a $200,000 gap. That was happening throughout the budget. So we needed to patch all those holes with the money from the override and the money that we saved by not filling those positions. We are very happy that we did that because I can say with confidence that the FY26 budget that we're living in right now has adequate funds to support the needs of all the students that we have and has the ability to support any concerns that pop up in the middle of the year that we need to address as well. And things happen every day in our schools. We work with 4,200 children that have a lot of needs, and they don't always come in perfect, and we try to help them as best we can. So the following page of the analysis, and I'm sorry that we're taking long on how we got here, but I think it's really important to understand why we're here. The impact of the two challenging fiscal years compromised our future budgets. We want to make sure that we're very clear that the ongoing work that we're trying to do right now is limited by the town's revenue forecasts. We're trying to learn from the previous budgets as best we can for the use of one-time money. We know that the school department can only conform to this 3.7% increase that we're getting for next year, which is less than level service for this year only. We are not able to sustain a school system that we all want to send our children to at 3.76 a year. We need that to be more like 4.5%, 5%, and the work that we're doing now between now and next budget season will reflect hopefully an outcome that makes that number higher or that expense percentage increase higher. Future budget projections currently stand at 3%, and that's not sustainable. So what we were talking about when this number came out in January was doing the best we can to make that 2.1 million go down as low as possible. I think we did a good job at that. And now we need to do the longer term work of making sure that we advocate for the school budget being more than 3% a year, because that's not a sustainable long-term vision of how we can support our schools. So we are making headway onto that as well. Analysis of just recent budgets and future impact. We are proposing reductions to the salary budget line of $1,049,000. We intend to use a deficit-based fiscal years and learn from them from FY24 and 25. We are trying not to use one-time money for this. We are trying to protect our revolving accounts and build them up over time. Those accounts were left in very low balances. An example would be that our circuit breaker account should have roughly $3.1 to $3.5 million in it, and we started the year with $8,000. So we really had to take a hard look at what we did in FY26 and begin to build back that balance sheet. We will use the fiscal strategies that we learned from in FY26 about being mindful of our balance sheet, mindful of our revolving accounts, and try to reset our budget in a way that's more sustainable moving forward. So when we get to how do we go about the reductions for this year, our goals and priorities when we started this work was to avoid reducing student-facing positions and protecting the classroom, identify workflows to redistribute the work to non-student facing positions. There's some of that in our reductions, and also look to other non-staff reallocations of resources. So we are reducing some of the budget that is not salary-based and it is non-salary-based. FY27 budget reductions on the next page. Please know that there's no reduction in elementary teachers. There's no reduction in art, music, PE, or world language. There's no reduction to the clubs and athletics that students take advantage of. And we will increase the budget by one bus. If you were a middle school or high school parent last year, you remember how bad that was, and we will increase the fee for all of those to make that work. There'll be no reduction to our mental health adjustment counselors or our guidance services for students, and there'll be no reduction in our intervention work in reading, early literacy, and math throughout the district. Those will all stay whole. The next page shows the original set of budget reductions. And in this document, now in our website starting tomorrow, what you will be able to see is this presentation. You'll also be able to see the context document that we have that outlines the rationale behind every reduction or every realignment that we had originally proposed and what we're moving forward with. So you'll understand a little bit more of the background. If I go too fast when I'm going through these reductions, you will have the ability to go back and look at that document that has more of a narrative for each one of those reductions. And this was reduction as of February 10th. There's another set of reductions that we made and shifted those for February 10. And then there's the shift in the reductions that we made today at our Finance Committee that shows a shift in this. So this is really not, this is the first view. There's two more views after this. So I'll go through this one and then I'll introduce the other two renditions as well. So we started with some positions that were not filled this year that we will not fill next year. One is the equity coach that was not filled during the school year, and we will not fill it next year. Another is a special education teacher that we had at the high school that last year the principal decided to choose to fill that with an adjustment counselor to serve students' needs as part of a special education program, but did not want to take on the special education role, so that was not filled. The director of finding performing arts resigned at the end of August. We have since provided a stipend through a lead teacher model for one of our music teachers, and they are doing that administrative work part-time in addition to their teaching duties. We will not fill, those three positions will not be filled in the upcoming budget. There is a data and analytics position that we have that we will be moving that work from the person that we're reducing to another position that we are restoring, which is the Director of Technology and Data Analytics. We think data is a very important service delivery. It's one of our 5 priority areas this year, and we feel we can embed that work into an existing position that we'll fill next year that will cover technology, the AI work that we're doing with staff and students, as well as do the data and analytics, and have that come from an education view and through a data view that will support our teachers throughout the year. We have 2 BCBAs that we had originally put in place. You will see in the pages that follow that we will be recommending that those 2 stay in the budget, that we'll be keeping those and have further discussion about how the workflow is or is not in place for that service delivery, but we will be putting that back in the budget. We will be reducing the Director of Nursing and turning that teaching position into a student-facing position with a lead teacher stipend, which means that that person will no longer be working out of an office, but also will actually be working in one of our school health clinics, seeing students every day. That is a model that was happening prior to COVID that had met with success. And we also will continue to have 1 nurse float in addition to a nurse in every single building. An academic tester position of 0.6 is someone who helps out our special educators in the testing work before initial evals, 3-year evals, and annual evals for students. We think our academic special education teachers need to take that role back and take that work back. 504 coordinator, we have 2. We're leaving 1 in the district and putting 1 on the list. Again, 504 service delivery work has always been done by our guidance counselors, adjustment counselors, school nurses, and school assistant principals. So that work will be filtered back to those positions that we have already in our schools. We had proposed a reduction in 3 teachers at the middle and high school. At the middle school, that was 1 special educator and 1 elective teacher. We have since taken the special educator off the list, and you'll see that in the later list. And the high school position was an English teacher that we are keeping on the reduction list because the class size does not warrant keeping that position. We have a 0.3 out-of-district coordinator that works with our roughly 48 students who are out of district. We already have a 1.0 out-of-district coordinator, and that 1.0 person will take up this work and do that work for the Milton Public Schools for all of our outside districts, students and families. And we did propose a reduction from 1.0 to 0.6, 3 days a week for our DEIB director, and we have since changed that to restore it to a full-time position in the district, and you'll see that in later pages. I'm gonna hold on that for a minute and go to the next realignment page, because we're gonna talk a lot about the reductions, I think, after we get through with the whole slides. Our people are gonna ask questions, I'm sure. While we were moving through the fall with a 5.2% budget increase that we thought would be in place, we wanted to make sure that we were looking at all of our resources and aligning them to things that we thought were important for the district that were still missing in the district. So that realignment meant that when we had our busing challenges this year, that we promised folks that we would actually address that, find money, raise the fee, and put the bus in place, and that's $100,000. So that's something that was in the budget last year that got cut right at the end of the year. And we really felt that hard this year for families that could not get their children to school. We'll be increasing our assistant superintendent for teaching and learning. We are a school district. That's the most important role in the district. That this year was started out as a 3-day-a-week role, will now go up to a full-time role. We'll be adding a lead nurse. All that means is we'll be providing a stipend for a nurse who will be the lead nurse to support the administrative duties, reporting to the state, working with the nurse department of department of 6 or 7, and providing support to students, as well as providing the administrative duties responsible by that individual in our nursing department. We will do the same thing and continue the fine and performing arts stipend. So our music teacher at the high school, Rebecca Damiani, will support the entire department through a part-time stipend, as she is doing this year. That has been going smoothly. It was a pilot, and it seems to be working. And when we're short money, that position was a $140,000 position, and the director of nursing was a $140,000 position. So that's where we're gonna make that reduction. We have increased our grade level facilitators for the Tucker School this year in order to create instructional leadership teams at each elementary school, but we piloted that work at the Tucker. The principal and her team have been able to create grade level teams and a building-based team to talk about teaching and learning, curriculum shifts, and data for our students in order to create a better mechanism of supporting students, teachers in the classroom. That's working very well at the Tucker this year. We want to scale it across all 3 of our elementary schools. In addition to that, at the Tucker this year, we increased one of the special education team chair in order for them to have 1 more day's worth of work, not to do team chair work, but actually to get into classrooms and find out what's working and what's not working on behalf of our special education students and be able to be more involved in what's happening in the classroom. We're leaving that position in place, that we're adding to that this year, and we're going to keep that ad in place for next year. We are increasing our contracted service budget by $50,000. And what that means is that with this reduction in the test taker and the 504, we're acknowledging that there might be some room for us to have to pay additional stipends or pay money if there's any separation of work that's heavier than we thought, and we're just planning on that safety net. We might spend all of that money, we might not spend any of that money. It really depends on what the numbers look like as we go through the year. We have a part-time director of human resources. We have 645 employees, and we have a human resource director that works 3 days a week. That is a job that's full-time. It has been very much a position that the lack of the position has created a lot of HR headaches with all of our staff related to leaves, work with our union, supporting people who are going on leave due to family illness, their own illness, taking care of their parents, taking care of their children. Again, 648 staff members in only a 3-day-a-week HR person is not a sustainable administrative environment. Some of the areas that we will be reducing or having offsets in, we are reducing $143,000 in general expense lines. Some of that is the curriculum, some of that is the PD, some of that is for legal fees. We are going to, through a fee structure that we're going to introduce to the school committee and finance, we're going to charge more for buses, depending on what the fee increase will look like. Assistant Superintendent Katie Blake has provided a staggered amount, $25 at a time. If we add $25, what would it look like? If we added another $25, what would it look like? And how we can support that added bus. This fee increase will also happen in areas of student clubs and also rental fees that we use to support the use of our gyms and fields, et cetera. We'll increase all those fees. We also have some adjustments to stipends that we'll be looking at that will also be a reduction to a budget of $51,000. So in the end, that reallocation green set of reallocating and reducing of certain areas of the budget is a net positive of about $72,000 that will be made up. Things that we're also doing that we're taking off the list that we did not fill, the Director of Instructional Technology will be filled and they will be given, in addition to their work, the work of data analytics. So that's where we absorb that workflow. The Assistant Director of Student Services, which is our special education department, did without the Assistant Director this year. We really need to talk about how we systematically go about the work of providing services to our families, whether it's the initial meeting with families, whether it's work that we do prior to students going on IEPs or 504s and how we organize our interventions and make sure that we have systems that are working for kids. And right now, I can say to you as someone who's been here for 9 months or 8 months, those systems need to be improved, and that assistant director position will go a long way in helping structure that work and communicate with all the staff members around that work. We also reduced the team chair last year because they resigned. The caseload for our team chairs at the middle and high school was unsustainable, so we're replacing that position as well. So you can see there's some ins and outs that have to do with all parts of our work, and that's how we were approaching the budget the week before break. The tally for that lands us right at $1,049,000 reduction with the ins and outs of the realignment and also the reductions to the budget of non-salary and the reductions to the budget in salary. Over break, after listening to folks and reading emails and corresponding with folks, I have to say out loud that the list I could look at differently given the feedback that we received. We thought a lot about it. We sent out to the school committee on the Tuesday of vacation a lot of different data points so they could consider the full picture and also take into consideration some positions that we might want to take off this reduction list. The positions that we had recommended back last week was reestablish the DEIB director from 3 days a week back to 5 days a week. At that point, we recommended taking the English teacher off the list, take the special education teacher off the reduction list, and put the 2 BCBAs and take them off the reduction list. That discussion that we had this morning changed this dynamic a little bit. So when you flip the page over, we see another rendition of the reduction list only changed by one position. We decided to put back the English teacher onto the reduction list because the class size is doable. And even though it's student facing, we feel like the class sizes would be appropriate at the high school. But we will be putting back into our budget and take off the list the positions that we have in orange. Some of the data that we looked at that helped inform this that we included in links at the end of this presentation that you can click on and see on the website was a new fee structure that we developed. We also gave folks all the positions that were hired since the 2019 school year. Those positions tallied up to 76 added FTEs to the district in 5 years. Of those 76 positions, 15 were one-time money. So that means that they were funded with grants or funded with one-time federal money, but didn't have a funding mechanism to follow them into the operating budget. And of the 50 that were teachers and or administrators, 40 of those teachers, I use teachers as unit A, teachers, adjustment counselors, math interventionists, literacy specialists, 40 of the 50 were connected to support services for our most vulnerable students. So we've been lucky enough to hire 40 positions that include adjustment counselors, literacy coaches, literacy teachers, math interventionists. All those positions, 40 of them in the last 5 years were hired. We also added about 25 Unit D paraprofessionals that support our special education students directly, in addition to the ones that we already have. So we went from about 85 to about 120 this year. So we're talking about 75 positions that have really put pressure on the budget that even after an override, have already strained the budget in the first year of the override. And I have lived in this community for almost 30 years, and I worked here for 16 years prior to being your interim this year. And after all the 3 overrides that I was a part of back in that day, we always had about 3 or 4 years worth of sustained financing in order to make our budget work. So I say that out loud because the positions that you'll view when you click on the link are all valuable. They're all people who are working hard. There are some positions that don't have good workflows, meaning that we added positions, but we didn't necessarily add the right pathways of work and accountability to make sure that they were reaching the classroom. And so as we look at the budget this year and next year and probably the following year, we're going to have to evaluate which of these positions we want to hold on to and prioritize. And if the budget gets tight over the next 2 years, we're going to have to prioritize the ones that we might not be able to keep. This is not the first year that you're going to have to go through this. You will go through this next year, and you may go through it the year after that to some level. Hopefully not this level, but at some level. So it doesn't matter that something was one-time funded, because if we need it, we need it. It doesn't matter if it was the last hire, because if we need it, we need it. But when we look at everything in its totality, we, especially in my role for 1 year, now 2 years, is to make the assessment and give advice to the district about what workflows are working, which workflows are not working, what do we need to pay more attention to, and what's the best budget that's sustainable that we can create in order to hire a new superintendent and have them start off on a good footing from a financial perspective and a service delivery perspective. And that will come with, here are the things that are working really well, and here are some of the things that you might need to address moving forward. Because certainly in a 2-year period, we're not going to be able to reset everything in the district. We want to make sure that we have a clear picture. We want to make sure we have an honest picture. And we want to go back to that first bullet point of our philosophy. We also are trying to get to a sustainable financial picture, because you can't strategize and think about what future years are going to look like for your children and for the schools if you can't have a sustainable funding source in order to support your strategy. So from a lot of different levels, from the classroom to the strategy, to school committee, to our families, to students, to staff, consistent funding is important, and having all of our staff have clear workflows that direct themselves right back to the classroom is very important. And if you've been at our meetings prior, you'll know that our number 1 priority is Tier 1 instruction, which is the classroom. The second one is making sure that we use data to inform how we approach that classroom instruction. The third is that we want rigor in every single classroom. The fourth is that we want to use all of the strategies and action steps to reduce the academic outcomes or increase the academic outcomes for those students who are not at benchmark. And the last is we want to do all that and keep our culture high, keep our happy parents, keep our students happy, and keep our staff happy. So that's what we decided to focus on as a leadership team. And we're trying to use those philosophy statements to back our budgeting as well. So again, in November, we thought we were going to be in a situation where this is going to be a nice rollover budget. We'll do all these shifting and realignment, but now we have to reduce $1 million, and that's what it looked like. So in the end, I think our final review for the budget for the realignments is a repeat page. We have reduced $1.1 million, the final page mark, I think. So we have a little bit of room here. We actually reduced a little bit more just by how the math worked out. And there was discussion in our finance committee meeting today about getting there by reducing the amount of money we'll put in circuit breaker and putting those dollars to the operating budget to lessen the impact of this budget decrease from staffing. So we do have a little bit of room if we reduce the circuit breaker by the discussion that we had this morning. So where are we getting the money to do this? We are taking the money out of the savings that we had hoped to put away. And instead of getting to that savings point in 3 years for our circuit breaker, we're going to stretch that savings journey to 4 years. So we're going to show you a little bit about that, what that looks like as well. In terms of documents, the last page, all the things that we sent to the school committee are going to be able to be clicked on and viewed by you. This will be in our FY 26 and 27 webpage on the budget. It's the reductions, realignment, and rationale document. But basically what that is a narrative for everything that I just talked about. There's a narrative there so you can read it through, so you can get a good sense of what that looks like at your own time. The historic budget positions added. that we went through since the 1920 school year. The annual town meeting, May 25 school FTE report, which is called Table 2. The FY 27 presentation, the one that we just went through, and also the circuit breaker options. And I think a lot of people have been hearing about circuit breaker. And if you don't know really what it means, that's okay. It's a really technical piece of our work, but it's really important to how we actually fund our schools and support our most vulnerable students. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that tonight as well. So we landed in a better place. We're not 2.1 short, we're only 1 million short. We're shaving down the edges of our budget in order to make it work. I know there's people who have strong feelings about different positions that are on that list, some of which have come off the reduction list and put back in the budget, some of them that are still on the reduction list. We do have a plan for our circuit breaker that might take 4 years instead of 3, but it's really important for you to have that reserve at a level that's sustainable for the town. And we believe moving forward that we can continue to revisit the workflows of all of our staff members at all levels of the district and get better at what we do. Our teachers work really hard. Our service providers work really hard. But we also want to make sure that we're working smart and working in a workflow that makes sense for children and also gets into the classroom where your children are. So that's my presentation. I don't know if you want to talk about the circuit breaker now to give that context for the folks at home as well.
I think if we did the circuit breaker and then had a discussion about the
What you
positions,
talked about
what we
and
talked
then,
about,
and then have,
Yep.
okay, perfect.
That wasn't able
Sure.
to be there this morning.
So, just for the public who are viewing, circuit breaker is a reimbursement program by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that every city and town and every school district submits a certain amount of expenses to the state. And if the expenses of any one child go over a certain amount, we'll use 50,000 as the example. If we spend 60,000 on a child's out of district placement, the state reimburses that last 10, whatever's over the 50. So that reimbursement means that you have to put up that money and service that child and all the children first, and that you get reimbursed the next year. We use those dollars with the box on the right-hand side with other revenue sources like federal money, which is the IDEA funds, state money, which is Chapter 70, but more importantly, our circuit breaker funds, and any local money that the town gives us for special education. So those 3 revenue streams are used strategically to pay all those bills during the year. And you don't get that circuit breaker money for this year. We didn't get that until October because they're reimbursing us from last year. So the guidance that the Association of School Business Administrators and School Superintendents get is you should keep 1 year's worth of that circuit breaker that you get and plan for that for your next year's budget. Don't spend it in the year that you get it. You should be using last year's money because you just don't know, you can't count on that reimbursement the following year. So when I arrived and Katie and I met, we realized that we were starting the year with $8,000 in an account that should have roughly $3 million in it. And that worried us tremendously. It worried me tremendously. These are bills to be paid. These are services that children need and deserve and are legally obligated to. And they need to be funded regardless. So when we looked at that, we realized we need to start working on our own to self-fill those accounts. That's why we didn't fill some of those positions in August. That's why we used these the money that we got in the override sparingly and tried to make it work. And we decided to go on a pathway of trying to increase that number to about $2.7 million over the course of 3 years, which is roughly 75% of around the $3.1 million that we thought would be enough money. So that was our strategy. Some people feel like that's too much money that we're saving, that we're shooting for. 2.7 is too much. I disagree. I think that number needs to be healthy because once that line in the budget goes, then everything else follows. That's the brick that holds everything underneath. That's the foundation. If that falls, then all the general services on top of the special education services will fall down. So we didn't think that we could get there in 1 year. We thought we should get there in 3 years. So that's why we put this proposal together. And that's why when we were getting money back and we discovered that we were short, we still wanted to hold the line on putting money into that account. So when we did that, of course, people said, are you really gonna put money in your savings account and not spending it on the people that you're laying off? It's a legitimate question. So that's what we just talked about. We talked about moving some positions back in, and we talked about extending that instead of 3 years to 4 years. So if Mark can go down, on your left-hand side, you see option 1, which basically has us using less circuit breaker money next year and the next 2 years, but still saving some of it in order to get to that number instead of in 3 fiscal years, but get there in 4 years. Keep in mind that that $2,700,000 number will probably at that point in time, because the circuit breaker number will go up, the expenses will get higher over the 4 years, will probably only represent about 60% at that point in time of what the number is needed. But we wanted to have a model that people could understand and also give you the rationale that we think is really important, that this is a really important revolving account to have, because again, it's part of the foundation of our budget moving forward for all students, not, and more importantly, the students that it serves. So at today's meeting, we talked about going with option 1, taking some money out of that revolving account and using it to offset some of the reductions, and that's what we did as a group this morning. Some of you may have been on that call, heard that discussion, and we wanted to make sure that we had the full story for the entire community tonight in the school committee meeting. And we will plan on using option 2, using 4 years to get to that circuit breaker revenue balance that we think is appropriate, and reestablish that after it's been emptied out, and use some of those funds to take some positions off the list. So that's the big picture understanding of where we are. I'm sorry that I rushed some of the rationale. You can go and click onto that and read it when it's live on the website. You can see the fee increases on the website that we'll be talking about, and you can take a look back at some of the positions that we have increased over the years, which one of those were one time, and what they looked like in terms of what their service delivery looked like. So all that data will be there for you to have. So with that, Mark and Amanda and Nathan as part of the finance committee, I'll let you carry it from here.
Thank you, John. Just one thing I want to make sure is clear on the circuit breaker piece is the dollar amount change. I don't know, you might have said that, but I might have missed it. Again, we were originally carrying, assuming a utilization of 2.6 million. We're now expecting utilization around 3 million, so that's the $400,000 difference. And that is what essentially is allowed for us to pull back those roles, and still provides, there's a little bit of buffer right now within what we do with that remaining about $100,000 that we are saving above what we need to hit the town's budget request of the 3.76%. I think your presentation, everything kind of covered everything we've talked about really well. So I don't have anything in particular to add about based on your presentation.
Just on your last point, John, about, by the time we get to FY29, I'm looking at the circuit breaker presentation, that ending balance of 2.7 million will actually be a different number because the costs change. And I feel like the cost increase. I assume reimbursements increase at the same rate. So should we imagine this as, potentially an inflated number that's still achievable in 4 years, or because of cost escalation, this 4-year plan may actually be a 5-year plan or something like that?
So thank you for the question. There's a lot of assumptions embedded in that option that Katie would probably speak better to, but the first assumption is that we're gonna get 3.5 every year. If you can see that circuit breaker number there, it says 3.5 million. That's just the number that we got this year. So we're just making the assumption that at minimum, that will be what the number is. That number will go up because the expenses will go up. And because this is a reimbursement, if our expenses go up every year, which they will, the reimbursement correspondingly follows in the dollar value of that. It's not the whole expense, but they should run parallel to that. Some of the concerns related to that are it's always a year behind. So if the expenses go up 1 year, you're not getting the money till the following year. And the other part of this is all up to the legislature to fund at a certain level. There's no mandate that they have to fund this at the level that they do. So there are years where they say, well, we were gonna fund it at 75%, but now this year we're having a hard time at the state, so we're gonna fund that at 60%. And when that's on the front of the globe, Everybody says, oh, I guess that's okay, but that means hundreds of thousands of dollars to every school district. So we want to make sure that we are explicit about that assumption means that, yes, expenses will go up correspondingly to the reimbursement, that 2.7 will be, I would assume that the reimbursement, the circuit breaker amount of 3.5 will probably be more like 4 by then. So if we get to 2.7, that's just that much less of a percentage of that, but we might be able to save more. And to your point this morning, Nathan, every year, if we set guidelines that we want circuit breaker to be roughly 75% of whatever it is, so we don't have to have this deep, heavy conversation every year, we should still visit every year. Geez, we're doing pretty good in circuit breaker. We could use a little bit of money of that to put in operating. We need it this year, just like we're doing right now. This is a very appropriate strategic conversation about budget. We should have this every year. We should not have the conversation every year that is circuit breaker important or not, and is the account important or not. That should be a staple. That should be automatic. But if we are having a hard year, we want to slow down a little bit and take $200,000, $300,000 out of it to use it for positions, then that should be something that the school committee does and has a lever for that kind of adjustment. That's an appropriate annual conversation we should have with the school committee, with the school administration, with the warrant committee, with the select board. So everybody knows that this money is flexibly used, but we can't take our eye off the ball and have that balance go too low, because once it does, it leaves the whole district vulnerable. So, so there are a lot of assumptions based on that. Those won't be exact numbers. They'll change every year with whatever happens every year. But keeping our eye on that 75% marker, I think is going to be good practice for the district.
Thank you.
And one of the things that was discussed this morning was a next phase of work to explore policy for the school committee to set our own guidance, for these out years and beyond, that sort of supports, as we've seen the select board do, regarding town reserves, what our approach is to setting aside until we've built it to an appropriate level. And so I think for anybody that didn't hear the conversation this morning, that's not the immediate piece right now, but it's important next conversation after we get through the budget itself.
In addition to that, once you reach that number that we all feel comfortable with, whatever that 75, once we get to the point where we quote need to be 4 years, then we don't have to dedicate additional money every year to build up there. So therefore, the money that we're using to add up every year, we can actually use for operating. So think about the town had a mandate to get their OPEB obligation paid off by 2030. People have been working on that since 1998. Some districts did it very slow, and now they're actually trying to catch up and get it done by the next 4 fiscal years. Some districts did it faster and paid it off right away. And during that time, people would say, why are you rushing to pay that off when you can use that money for things like police and fire and schools? And they just wanted to get that obligation done, because once you get it done and it's paid, then you can free up all that operating money. So that's what the town of Milton did, and I think I congratulate them. They pushed through some hard years. They paid their OPEB up to date. Now they have 8 or 9 years where that money is now not having to go into the OPEB account. It can be used for things like schools, police, fire, DPW, council on aging, et cetera. So this is the same thing. Once we get that balance to what we think it should be, we can then slow down on contributing to it and take some of those dollars and begin to expend on positions in other parts of the budget that don't have to go into that account anymore. So that would be the incentive, actually, to get to that point as well.
I did have a question. I know a few years ago when our special ed and transportation increased significantly, are we, this method that we are following, will that kind of help if that were to happen in like the next 4 years?
Yeah, anything, yeah, Katie, go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm doing all the talking, so.
That's okay. I think that's one of the important pieces of being able to have a balance in the circuit breaker account, is that the intent of the account is to be able to offset those expenses and the fluctuations in the expenses, so that you have a mechanism to do so, and so that you don't have to impact any of the general education expenses in the operating budget. So it's a perfect example of those increases that were significant were set by the state, and we didn't have an opportunity to say, no, we're not going to pay them. And so that 14% increase circuit breaker is an appropriate funding source to be able to offset some of that significant increase if you do have a balance in your account.
And you don't have to go farther than today's article in the Boston Globe, or it was yesterday or today, that talked about special education transportation and transportation costs in general, and how they are, very much crippling school budgets. And so trying to, hopefully the state will step in and come up with a plan to continue to include it in circuit breaker is one way of helping, and also providing some other legislation that will help us negotiate with the vendors and to continue to be able to do this in a way that is budget appropriate, for lack of a better term.
We had a conversation about the positions, and I recognize that not everybody was in our meeting. So I just did want to make sure that we had the opportunity, Val, I knew that you weren't able to, but you weren't part of the conversation this morning, and I wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity to talk about that and the positions that we're adding back in, any thoughts around them. I did want to ask one question around it. So, and John, I appreciated earlier you talking about sort of the structures and positions being tied to things. Like, so there are positions that were maybe hired, or things that were brought in that there's really not maybe a chain. They're not connected. There's not either a reporting structure or a foundation that they're tied to. And so I think that piece is really important. So I think that there are positions that we are talking about removing that I just would want to make sure there's clarity around how that would work. Because in theory, I understand it and I've seen it elsewhere. But so, for example, the 504 coordinator, I know historically it might have been a guidance counselor, nurse, vice principal, et cetera. But I think having clarity around who sort of owns it. So I recognize part of it could be based on the student's disability. If it's a health-related issue, then it might be the nurse, but sort of who is the person guiding that? So making sure that there's that structure in place for the one that if a family's coming in and saying, I think my child needs to be on a 504, they know who to go to. So I think having clarity around that will be really important. And there was another one that we were talking about. And then I think just similarly that what we had talked about this morning around the BCBAs, that, recognizing that the model is changing, moving to a more service-oriented model, recognizing there's also a direct service model. But then if there is ultimately that service model shifts and there isn't the need for as many BCBAs because other people are helping do some of the work that they're responsible for now that might not typically be within their framework, that there is the time for that training, that instruction, that there's that lead time for people to come up to it. And I think the other piece that I just think is important is recognizing, at least, this I think just became very clear, and I think a lot in the conversations that we've had with the community is with respect to the DEIB role. There's recognition that there have been several people in that role, and I don't think it's fair to say, I don't think it's about the people who are in the role. I think it's that we need to find a way to have structure, have supports, have something in there so that they can be successful. And I think, having clarity around that will be really important in order for us to support that position and really allow that, allow there to be success and allow us to really look to have some of the gains that we're hoping, looking at some of those gaps, looking at some of the achievement gaps or opportunity gaps, that sort of thing, and really, and probably finding other ways to make sure that they are tied within the schools and the system. So, that might be, I think I'm happy that we're continuing to do it and giving it that opportunity, but I think if we continue to do it the way that we've done it, then we're gonna keep floundering. And So I think that's the piece that we really should kind of focus on to ensure that they can be successful in that role. So I think for me, as I'm looking at things, that piece around structure, process is very important for those roles to be successful, or if we are shifting, or if we're taking any away, that we're clear around that process for the removal.
So we talked a little bit about who might pick up, different types of work depending on what the role is that might be reduced, and we gave the 504 coordinator the example of that going to guidance to the nurse, et cetera. But when we also talked about this morning, the big picture of, two big pieces of work, I think would be really helpful for the school department to take on over the next 3 to 5 years, which is, one is MTSS, which is the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed sanctioned approach to how services are provided to students and families. You might know the term student support team, which means if a child's having a hard time, the teacher might recommend that child to the student support team, and people will hear what's going on with that child and try to make recommendations to support that child, to give them what they need to enhance their ability to be successful, whether it's a regular ed accommodation or maybe going for a team meeting and having a special education recommendation or a 504 recommendation or adjustment counseling, whatever that could be. SST is an outdated model. MTSS is really a best practice that the state really invested a lot of money in several years ago. And what it does is it allows all the professionals to get around and really connect on a lot of the positions that we've been talking about, how they can be best utilized on behalf of the students, and how those discussions happen with data in order to determine what's needed for students to be successful with either their ability to attend to a task at the elementary level, or to get support for any kind of clinical mental health issue, or whether that's a reading, early literacy. MTSS is a comprehensive program that I think we as a district should invest in. It usually takes a sum of money to gather a third party to come in to comprehensively do that work across the whole district. It should be a pre-K to 12 endeavor. And the other one that we've been talking about at our leadership meetings is the cultural responsive teaching work that sounds like it was done at the leadership level over time, but never really done with the whole staff. I believe the district worked with Khalees Warnham, who I've worked with closely for a good period of time. I think that she is fantastic. I think that her work not only needs to be in front of our leadership team, it needs to be in front of our teachers, our custodians, our administrative assistants, our coaches, so we can more embed the understanding of bias and how it works in schools and help shape the work. I think our director of DEIB is one person, and he or she shouldn't carry the burden of all this work. This work should be shared amongst the district. It should be embedded in how we do our work around service delivery. It should be embedded in our curriculum, how we do assessment. There's a lot of work to be done, and one person shouldn't be in charge of that work. They should be coordinating, consulting, and being the expert to look down at that work, but we need the work to be embedded. So we talked a lot this year about our 5 priorities and how DEIB thinking is embedded in all 5 of those priorities. And so I think moving forward, we'd be better served by embedding that in a more comprehensive way than leaving that in the hands of any 1 or 2 or 3 folks. And I don't think that has been done in the district in the last several years. From what I understand, I haven't been here for a while, and I think that, observing and being in schools every week, I think that it would be a worthwhile financial commitment and professional development commitment for us to do. That's why when we thought about the reduction, we right now are working with Dr. Shavers on retention and hiring practices. As a very thin, narrow workflow. We also have to work we're doing a lot of professional development. We're doing professional development with our teachers, with our Unity paraprofessionals. But that one role can't do all that work. It needs to be broadened across HR, the director of diversity, the assistant superintendent, the school leaders, our curriculum leaders. It needs to be embedded throughout the district. So I would recommend that be a chunk of work that the district, those 2 chunks of work taken on and seriously considered for a several year strategy of embedding it into the district.
Questions, thoughts, comments?
I do have a follow-up on the suggestions that you made about DEIB. I think those are all great. I do want to highlight that there are some things happening in pockets within the schools that I've, heard from my daughter and just observations that I've seen. For instance, IS English teacher who intentionally incorporates SAT words into her lessons to help students expand their vocabulary in 8th grade. Because she's thinking ahead and saying, hey, if I help these kids, perhaps those kids that might not have access or financial resources to hiring tutors and college consultants can have a chance to apply to a school that they might not to be able to otherwise. A teacher who throws a pizza party because everybody in her class ended their term with an A average. It's an opportunity for students to engage over a meal. Who might not otherwise be friends, they have an opportunity to connect with each other. It creates a sense of belonging. I've seen a lot of small pockets of examples like this, so I think there is a lot of good that's happening, maybe not at the larger district level. So I hope that we can kind of leverage our individual DEIB committees at each of our schools and work with our DEIB director to really create that, give her the support that we need in this meantime while we do all this other stuff, to kind of continue that, keep that work going. Like, I would like to start seeing, even if it's tiny little things that we implement, making sure that we implement those so that that work continues and our community feels supported through this process, I think would be huge. And even if there's small events like, our Pierce DEIB team, for instance, we talked about doing a community project, and it could be small, but it's an opportunity to share, learn about each other's cultures, find commonality. I think that's the biggest thing because it helps people belong, feel like they belong and feel part of the school community, encouraged. If they feel confident about who they are, it helps, helps them achieve higher, the academic rigor that you're talking about, some of these examples I shared also show that because the kids are encouraging each other to do better, the teachers are pushing them to do better, and they're having the support. And so those things, I think, really, really, it's a great way to see how DEIB ties back into your, our priorities of increasing rigor and offering those support. So I really do see the connections. They're not district-wide just yet, but they're in pockets, but I see a lot of potential, so I hope we can leverage that.
I also just want to add that we have paid DEIB leads in every school that support the PTO groups that run in every school, that the principals are involved in, and Dr. Shavers is involved in. Get together that every school will come together with their committees to share best practices, what's going on in their schools. We'd like to see that every fall and every spring. I think we have a couple of members of CDM here tonight that remember that we did that years ago, and it was just really a chance for each school to have their own authentic approach to the work, but also have a centralized theme of how we want to go about the work and share best practices. So we're reinstituting that in March. We'd like to do that every fall and every March. So that there is good work happening in different buildings in different areas, and that needs to continue. But I do believe that we also need to take the lens high up and look at what we need in the district, because a lot of this work just it needs to be shared, it needs to be collaborative, it needs to be embedded in the things that we do on a daily basis. So all good things in pockets, but let's tie them together.
Yep, absolutely. Would like to just really affirm the points that are surfacing here around the need to be doing both. I'm glad to see the retention of the investment in DEIB, in the budget. I also am very appreciative of the investments in HR. I made this point this morning, but to me, it can't be understated overstated rather, like the investments in HR are necessary on so many levels, but including the ability to actually improve on something we've been talking about for years, which is to recruit and retain a more diverse staff for our district. That is just but one finding that we've known about for years. We've not done anything differently. We've not seen different results. And now to be making these two investments in full-time HR director as well as a full-time assistant director of curriculum and instruction, where there can be that focus on professional development that has been lacking, which includes the ability to focus on implicit bias training among so many other MTSS-related focus areas. I just, I think it's nuanced, but this need to really focus in on the systems building. We've heard a lot about this over the past few years. We've not seen it in practice. And I know that those of us who've been sitting here are very tired. I'll only speak for myself. I'm very tired of the constant acknowledgement that we need the systems, but yet what are we doing differently to actually create and build the systems? This is what we're doing, is actually putting capacity in place and talking about, well, we retain that important role, and we think about how to help it, as you were just saying, Amanda, be have traction both internally within the district and externally with the community. And it's not the job of one person or a small team, but it is everybody's job. I am really glad to hear you talking about this in this way, and you're here for next year. And this, I expect, to continue into further action steps that can hopefully, in the short term, along with the added investments on targeted needs for additional support at the Tucker that we've seen elsewhere, I would like to be optimistic that we'll start to see some results. But I think for the community, maintaining the short, medium, and long-term view, it's difficult, but this is what I think we're needing to do. And this morning it came up, part of what we're doing here as well is identifying what we're looking for in our next superintendent. We're able to, I think, do better than we did last time by having a very clear picture of the person that will be able to come in here and lead our district to the success that we expect. The DEIB, skill set and competencies is one area. The financial management is another one. And so I appreciate the conversation. I appreciate the difficulty for the community, for us. Thank you for having gone back through, honestly, how we got here, because it can't go without saying that none of us want to be in this conversation, and we didn't think we were in this conversation. We're doing the best we can in an unfortunate situation, having managed the best we could, and we did well with what was in our control. And when it came to our attention, what we needed to do, we're now doing that. But I appreciate that you went through an inclusive process with your staff, your leadership team. You're iterating on it. That's what this process is designed for. It's to, put something forward and be open to feedback, which you have been, from the community, from school committee members, and doesn't make it easy or pleasant to be having to do this, but I feel like the process has integrity, and I appreciate that. I do also appreciate everybody who's, shared input and who's here tonight. This is a lengthy discussion for you to, be sitting through, as was this morning's valuable discussion at finance. So, sorry, that was a little rambling, but it's a lot, you know? And I think we're being thoughtful, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate the contributions of everybody, to it. But, you know, it's a lot we have to do. And I feel like we have a more clear plan than we have had since I've been here. And I can say that as the person who's been here the longest, except for you, John, but you came back, you know what I mean? So, we'll continue honing this over the coming weeks, and I'm confident we're doing the best that we can.
And I would only say that these are recommendations that we're listening in. None of this is perfect. How we implement, we do a lot of good things for kids every day. The teachers work hard, the students are happy. But is there better work we can do in certain areas of the district? Absolutely. And even though we're making some good jumps in, whether it be working with the Teachers Lounge, or we're going to be the first non-Boston Public School District to work with the Boston Plan for Excellence, which is a teacher and minority recruiting service. We're very excited about. We're really looking to be supportive of all the different service deliveries that we do. It's not perfect. It's a work in progress. It will be a work in progress. And we also have to make sure that we have a budget that follows that work, and also have the strength to actually point out what's working, what's not, and actually have a hard conversation about what may or may not be working, and try to reallocate the resources to what's working. But your children are in great hands with great teachers every day. We're in your schools every day. We see it, and there'll be good work there's a lot of good work to do and hard work to do, but there's a lot of good stuff happening in schools every day. So as your current superintendent, I'm amazed at the hard work that we see every day, and the amount of family participation that we see is amazing as well. So it's, the work is going to be good, and it'll be good work moving forward.
Appreciate everybody sharing thoughts. I totally echo, I think, the sentiments that you all said about committee positions, just as I share kind of my thoughts about each position. Again, as it relates to the DEIB director, I totally agree. I'm very glad we added it back. I think points that have been made, and just want to echo them because they were made very well. The work of kind of dismantling structural racism, white supremacy culture embedded within systems, within an institution, especially as old as Milton, it's way more than one person. One person can never do that. That needs to be the responsibility of everybody at this table, everybody within all of our buildings, to support all of our students, not just our students of color, but all of our students. At the same time, I like your statement of it needs to be both and. At the same time, reducing our capacity in that important work when we know we have so much more work still to do in that area does not feel right and like the right move for the district. I think, again, we heard that from families who kind of reached out. I appreciate the adjustments to kind of address that, and I'm glad that position's added back in. I think I have less strong feelings about this BCBA because I've seen those roles look different, to kind of the point you were saying, different service delivery methods. But I think, again, based on the feedback we've received from families, your point on this kind of being a transition, keeping those in order to allow for that transition and see if there is a different service delivery method where those roles might not be as necessary. I again appreciate how the responsiveness to kind of the community feedback related to that. As it relates to some of the positions that we have not prioritized adding back in, I think a role that I asked about and have some hesitation on, but again, for the feedback, is the Director of Fine and Performing Arts. I highly value that. I know so many of our kids highly value that experience when they come here. I know that's something that so many people talk so well about, is the theater program, the music program, and just how phenomenal that is within Milton. I think that's one of the kind of shining stars of our district. And so I'm again asked and got feedback that so far this year there have not seemed to be kind of gaps. I know a lot of the excellent work is done by the teachers who are working directly with those kids, and so I'm sure the director added a lot to that. But if we are able to provide that delivery through a stipend, have those savings, given we are in a place where we have to find some cuts to meet the budget that is allocated to us, I think that's an effective place. I think that generally follows the philosophy of like keeping the dollars as close to the kids as possible, which again, generally talked about. So that is something I'd like us to keep an eye on, is just that those programs don't suffer without that type of kind of position, and that we're able to provide the support that those teachers need through that lead teacher model. I think the combining the data analytics role within the other role is a good idea, and so I appreciate that. I think generally the special education positions is a place I really defer to the department on in terms of IEP minutes and, what is necessary for us to provide the service delivery. I think, it's a huge problem if we are not able to provide students, if we're underserving students on IEPs and 504, that's a huge problem. It's also a problem if we are over-servicing students on IEPs. And so I think that's sometimes hard for folks outside of education to understand. It's like, well, any service to kids is helping kids, but if you over-service them, the goal of special education is to provide them the level of service that allows them to access the general instruction and have the same opportunities as all other students, right? Eventually, in as many cases as possible, build the skills, build the ability to kind of maybe pull them out of that over time. There are obviously some situations where that is not possible, and that's fine. Those need to provide services kind of all the way through. But I think those are roles where those positions can go up and down based upon service delivery needs of the kids. Over the last 2 years, we've lost, from a percentage basis, seems like about 60 kids within special education. So you'd assume it depends obviously on who those kids are, where they are, the IEP minutes, all those like details that people in special education know very well, of like what that means in terms of number of positions. But just from that like percentage number, that's gone down a little bit. So it would make sense to me that there be some capacity within existing roles where we could cut that back. So appreciate you looking at that. Another one that has some folks have brought up is the director of nursing role. Again, I appreciate the passion of the folks who kind of reached out about that. It's clear that the current director of nursing has some people who really have built strong relationships with them. So I understand that. From a position standpoint, I think the model you're talking about is a model that my school district utilizes, which is the lead nurse. In my role, I oversee the nursing department. I work with the lead nurse, we establish health policies, things like that. And so I work very closely with all of the nurses. And we have a lead nurse model where our school-based nurses receiving a stipend to work with the physician that contracts with the districts, that helps kind of coordinate schedules around testing and support professional development for all the nurses and kind of share updates. And that works really well for my district. And so I think that's something that colors my opinion on this cut. I think I've seen it work really well, and so I think it can work well. Bigger concern with the nursing department, I shared a bit this morning, is just the ratios, specifically at Pearson High School, because those are 1,000-person schools. And so with 7 nurses across kind of all of those, those 2 schools I think are in particular ones. I know at high school kids are more independent, and so the ratios aren't quite the same as kindergartners in terms of the hand-holding they need. So it's not apples to apples, but that's one I'm a little worried about. I appreciate you're adding the extra float nurse to get up to 7. I know we talked about, do you add the other float nurse to get up to 8? And so I appreciate you saying, I think probably your recommendation is start the year with 7, see how it's going, and potentially have the flexibility to add that role in. So I think as long as we're building in that flexibility to add that role in, I'd be comfortable with the district's direction in that area. But again, generally very appreciative of the public feedback that we've received thus far, appreciate the responsiveness to the public feedback and all of the data you provided and how we have communicated about this. I think I've received some feedback from people on improvements maybe we can make to communication next year, which I think is fair and always something we want to look at. But really glad that I think we are trying to get input. I'm eager for the additional input we'll receive tonight. I'm eager for the input that hopefully we'll receive at the PIC budget meeting. Really glad that we're not going to have a vote on the budget the same night as the public budget hearing on March 11th, which has been our practice the last 2 years here, which I've always thought has been a bit silly, and so glad we're changing that. So we'll have, again, not just tonight, but then 2 other opportunities in addition to emails. We've gotten lots of emails. Please keep emailing if folks have opinions, thoughts, feedback. So please keep giving that, because that has influenced some of the budget direction. continue to influence the budget direction. This is not a finalized budget. We don't expect to have that until closer to March 18th. So, that's my.
I also want to add that I really appreciate John and your team thoughtfulness that has gone into this process. I know it's never easy when it's positions, but I also appreciate how you've kind of looked at positions that have been empty, like the technology director, and then bring out, hey, I might need to add that back in. So there is that, we're gonna try this out, and then if we need to add that back in, or another position in the future, there is that flexibility in kind of assessing what is working, what is not. I think that's so important, and I'm glad that you're looking at it like that, and that this is a very fluid process. And I also really appreciate the community reaching out with a lot of feedback, good stuff. It's so great that you're all so passionate and involved in this process. I feel great to be part of this community as a result. So it is like we're all working together on this, and we love that you are so supportive of the work that we're trying to do here, and we want to do right by all of your children. So thank you for your feedback.
So we'll make that list.
Yeah, that'd be great. So we will now open up to public comment. Of course, I have to find my public comment notes. So in accordance with school committee policy, we welcome members of the community to share their perspectives with us during public comment. We've set aside up to 15 minutes for this part of the meeting, and individuals may speak for up to 3 minutes each. I will have a timer. I try not to be rude. If you hear it, just know that I'm going to ask you to wrap up your comments, but allowing to stick within that will allow more people to speak, so I appreciate that. While the school committee does not respond directly to public comment, there may be opportunities for members to address issues that are raised over the course of the meeting when relevant topics are on our agenda, which we just did. We strive to engage in respectful discourse during our meetings and ask the public comment speakers keep that in mind. Speakers should introduce themselves for the record. So we have people, I don't know if there are going to be people online as well as in the community, so we will, in the room, so we'll be going back and forth. We will start with the room, people in the room, and we had a sign-up sheet, so we will start with Ian Maripol.
Can I go ahead and just remind folks
Oh, yeah,
online
and
to go ahead?
Yeah, if you are online if you are online and interested in speaking, if you could raise your hand, that would be helpful, and we will call on you. So Ian, if you could give me 1 second so that I can do my really obnoxious timer. Just hold on a second. Okay, go ahead. Thank you.
So, thank you. Good evening. My name is Ian Maripol. I live at 45 Avalon Road. I have 2 daughters at Pierce Middle School who are truly getting a world-class education. And I want to acknowledge what Lizzie said. This is tough, right? And these are hard times. And these are difficult times we're living in. And every public and private business and nonprofit is dealing with financial burdens, and every single one of them are making cuts. The Mass Municipal Association recently issued a report declaring that the financial state of cities and towns is, quote, a perfect storm. Milton, unfortunately, is not alone. None of us want to see people lose their jobs, particularly after the town came together so incredibly to pass such a large override last year. It's heartbreaking, especially people who dedicate their lives to educating our children. And every one of us feels that the roles being eliminated affect them and their families the most. And that's a testament to what the staff of Milton Public Schools and how impactful they are to our families. Recognizing these challenges, I want to offer my full support to Superintendent Phelan and the school committee. These are hard decisions, but they are appropriate and needed to make sure we aren't facing even greater cuts or another attempt at an override a year from now, either of which could lead to either even greater cuts and further devastating impacts on staff, students, and family. Like you mentioned earlier, we've added about 75 staff members over the past 5 years, many including those proposed to be eliminated with one-time funds. Staffing full-time positions with one-time funds was not sustainable, and it is catching up to us now. But we're not alone. Communities like Hingham and Brookline, which also recently passed large overrides, are also dealing with potential cuts. It's also very upsetting to hear some of the things being said about the people who are making these hard decisions. I don't envy Superintendent Phelan and the school committee, but I'm very grateful for their service. Many of them, this is a volunteer position.
I know it's part of the job, but it's not easy. In my heart, I don't believe that any groups are being targeted with these proposed cuts. So thank you, Superintendent Phelan, for what you do for our students, and my sincere and utmost thanks to the school committee for the time and care with which you do your job. Milton is in great hands. Thank you.
Is there anybody online who's interested in speaking? If so, if you could raise your hand.
No hands currently raised on
We'll come back. The next person we have is Chris Navin? Navin. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Navin, 34 Cliff Road. I have two sons, both of whom are Caucasian and are now grown men. When we moved to Milton in 1995, my wife and I were concerned that there was little racial or cultural diversity in school staffing and culture. So I joined committees that I hoped would address this, and eventually co-founded Citizens for a Diverse Milton, which has worked with every superintendent since the year 2000. But the lack of staff diversity has persisted, even as the diversity of the student body steadily grew. Recognizing this problem in 2001, the school committee created a diversity policy, stating that the composition of the staff should reflect that of the student body. Any progress toward that goal now seems to have stalled. The policy also required the superintendent to present a diversity report to the school committee every October, which is not happening to my knowledge. So what? Milton's an excellent school system, isn't it? Students come out well prepared for college and careers, don't they? Well, they usually do if they fit the mold. But if they are from a low-income family, or a family of color, or if they have special needs, the data tell us that many, perhaps most, do not graduate well prepared for college and careers. This is a systemic failure that is, in part, due to the lack of a richly diverse and well-trained teaching staff. My point is that now is not the time to cut the DEIB office. Few recommendations from the 2021 equity audit have been implemented. Is this committee content to accept grossly different outcomes for student groups that don't fit the prevailing mold? All three DEI staff positions should be kept in the budget, all three. Also, the position of Director of Data and Analytics should be protected because it is through in-depth annual reporting that the community can be informed about the effectiveness of instruction. You as the school committee, and we as parents and taxpayers, need good data to know whether the Milton Public Schools are truly making progress towards educational excellence for all. Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Beverly Ross Denny.
I might yield my spot to Adina Schechter. How far is she, low is she on the list?
She is 7.
She's
Number
7.
7.
Sure. I'll send my email out. Beverly.
Hi, good evening. I'm Adina Schechter, a Milton resident, parent of a 7th grader at Pierce and a 9th grader at Milton High, and the former DEIB coach for the Milton Public Schools from 2022 to 2025. A few days ago, I wrote to you with questions about the recent budget reduction list. I'm glad that there's now the DEIB director role is fully restored. That's good news. I asked what current data we have to show whether we've made progress on our DEIB goals since the 2021 equity audit, which Chris just mentioned, which identifies factors that support and limit equity in our district. Before we cut DEIB roles, I think it's important to understand why they were created in the first place, what has been accomplished, especially in light of talking about culturally relevant teaching, which is a big part of the work I did for the last few years, and to think about how these roles have impacted student experiences and outcomes. So I wanted to share just a little bit of historical knowledge as someone who's really been around since the equity audit, and make some recommendations based on the barriers that I saw over the last few years. When I was first hired, it was the restorative justice coach position. It was a DESE mandated grant-funded role, focusing on addressing the disproportionality and suspension data. According to the 2021 equity audit, using FY 2019 data, Black students in Milton were receiving out-of-school suspensions at more than 4 times the rate of white students. Our theory of change was that if we used restorative approaches consistently, we could reduce reliance on suspensions. In my first year, all staff in the entire district received an introduction to restorative justice. And those who wanted to go deeper, they opted into an after-school professional development. I personally led, because we didn't have the capacity to really roll out it's systematic, to the whole district. I led a lot of those proactive community building circles for students who needed mentorship and social emotional support. And I worked with leaders at Pierce and MHS to co-lead restorative circles after incidents that previously would have led directly to suspension. I don't know what the data shows now, but those suspension rates dropped, and in 2022, there was a law that passed that you can't just suspend kids for you need to have data that you've actually used restorative practices first, so that helped us as well. Even when suspension was necessary, we held reentry circles to repair relationships and support students returning to learning. I later synthesized a lot of this work in a document that I did share with the policy committee. I know, Lizzie, you were on it, and I'm going to share this with you with documents linked, because I think it's an important document called the Milton Public Schools Code of Ethics Handbook. And I sought feedback at the time from all peer staff, all MHS staff, and school site councils. By the end of 2022-2023 school year, the then DEIB Director Claire Galloway Jones and I recognized that we needed to go beyond discipline and support more inclusive, culturally responsive teaching. That's why I switched to the DEIB coach role, because I had extensive experience doing this work in Boston Public Schools. And in 2023-2024, I moved into that role, and Cyrus Rivers became the restorative justice coach. They really were 2 different full-time jobs. And I will send you more information about the specific work that I did in the DEIB coach role, because I just want to make sure in terms of workflows that all of that work, I think that we really want to be thoughtful about how that work happens if my former role doesn't exist. So here's some recommendations I have. The first thing that I think is maybe the most important thing is to intentionally create and sustain a culture of feedback. In Milton, some staff eagerly sought coaching, but in other cases, when I raised concerns about how grading, discipline, or instructional practices were harming Black and brown students, I was shut out. People wouldn't speak to me, they wouldn't return my emails, and often went to the union to complain. There were a few incidents. This is not everybody, I don't want to generalize, but the few times that happened, it sits with me, because the kids in those situations were not, they didn't receive justice. Then that was my job to do that. We cannot make progress if honest feedback about equity is treated as a threat instead of an opportunity to grow. To build this culture, there must be a stronger partnership with the Milton Educators Association. DESE now includes culturally responsive teaching and the evaluation system, and administrators need to be able to name clearly which practices promote equity and which undermine it. The biggest barrier I've seen is the defensive and fear of getting in trouble. I get it, or fear of, as a white woman myself, being labeled racist. Like, these are things that are real fears, but we have to move beyond adult discomfort so that every student has teachers who are willing to receive the honest feedback and grow from it, with an evaluation system that both holds staff accountable and supports them.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, wrap up. Okay. I think the last thing I was going to get into is I really advise going back to that equity audit and looking into the buckets of curriculum, programming such as the French immersion, AP access, and accountability and evaluation. All those things are listed specifically. Where are we on those things? I think the community needs an update, because we spent money on that equity audit. I am deeply invested in how DEIB evolves in Milton Public Schools, both as an educator and a parent. And I work for the Boston Plan for Excellence now. And so if there is a future partnership, I hope to be involved because this is where I live and I want to make sure every kid, not just my own two kids, but every kid gets what they deserve in terms of having teachers who want to focus on equity and grow from, from their learning. So thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it. Camille?
If someone wrote their name down
Did
and
somebody write
crossed it
their name
out.
and cross it out? I just want to
I
make sure.
did,
You did, okay.
Okay.
but I put it back.
Oh, you did put it
Okay.
back? Okay, then come back, after Camille.
No, actually, I'll
Yep.
talk to you when I get.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Camille Sanabria Cooper. I live at 551 Center Street. I am a Glover and Pierce mother, and I am also a Milton Public School substitute school nurse. Good evening. I'm speaking tonight in support of maintaining the Director of Nursing position. This is not about a specific individual. It's about structure, safety, and legal integrity of our district. What works for other districts may not also work for our district. Eliminating the Director of Nursing position and instead assigning those responsibilities to a lead nurse with a stipend is not an equivalent substitution. A stipend does not create additional time in a day. It does not reduce clinical workload, and it does not transform a building-based position into a district-level administrative and regulatory role. The Director of Nursing is not simply a more experienced school nurse. It is an entirely different role. A lead nurse focuses on building-level clinical care. A Director of Nursing is responsible for district-wide leadership, regulatory compliance, policy development, supervision, staffing oversight, and public health coordination. The responsibilities of a Director of Nursing are extensive and specialized. They include writing and updating district-wide policies, ensuring compliance with state and federal regulations, overseeing care for medically complex students, managing outbreak response, coordinating with public health authorities, supervising nursing staff, guiding high-risk clinical decision-making. These duties require advanced education, experience, and protected administrative time. If a lead nurse is expected to absorb these responsibilities while still managing a school building, something will give. Either building level care will suffer, or district-level compliance will. That is not a sustainable or safe model. Our district serves students with increasingly complex medical needs and significant medical fragility. Regulations governing their care are constantly evolving. Ensuring compliance is not optional. School nurses practice with significant autonomy, and with that autonomy comes substantial liability for the nurse and for the district. If policies are outdated, if procedures are not legally sound, or if staffing models compromise safe care, the consequences are serious. Investigations, lawsuits, and regulatory findings are far more costly than maintaining appropriate leadership. There seems to be an assumption that having an extra float nurse means operational gaps can easily be absorbed. That is not realistic. Floats are already covering vacancies as we speak. If a newly enrolled student requires one-to-one nursing care or a medically complex student needs dedicated coverage, that float is no longer considered extra. Now consider that scenario where a lead nurse is also expected to function as a Director of Nursing. Who is covering their building? That math simply does not work. I am concerned that only one member of the nursing staff was consulted before moving forward with this proposal. Decisions of this magnitude would benefit from a broader clinical input from the full nursing team. I also would draw attention to the committee's attention to the fact that positions are still being considered for elimination, despite there being viable proposals that would allow the district to preserve staffing while still protecting financial reserves. There have been thoughtful alternatives put forward that could achieve savings without cutting critical roles. Choosing not to pursue these options suggests that it's not simply about fiscal necessity, it's about priorities. Eliminating the Director of Nursing does not eliminate the workload. It redistributes high-level regulatory and public health responsibility onto staff who do not have the time, structure, or formal authority to carry it safely. This is about student safety. It's about compliance. It's about responsible risk management. The Director of Nursing role is critical to infrastructure within the district. It is preventative leadership. Preventative leadership is always less expensive than a crisis response. I urge you to carefully consider the long-term implications before restructuring a role that is foundational to protecting our students and our district.
We have time for one more. Did you wanna-
I'll cede my position to Beverly Ross.
And Beverly will be the last speaker. This is
Beverly Ross Denny, 107 Columbine Road, former school committee member and town meeting member, current town meeting member. A school committee member once told me that your budget is your strategic plan and your strategic plan is your budget. Your initial FY27 proposed budget cuts tell me that you do not value or prioritize our most vulnerable students. Students with special needs, Black and brown students, students living in poverty, and LGBTQ+ students who rely on the staff you've proposed cutting. Earlier today, Interim Superintendent Phelan shared that he was tasked by the school committee to create a sustainable budget. But you may not have understood the Milton context when making this request. For at least the last 5 years, and probably the better part of a decade, the initial funding offered by the town was always insufficient. And then the budget was always negotiated. They never have enough money, but they always give us the money. Last year, we passed the largest override in town history with a wide margin of victory. Furthermore, the select board had a significant shift which reflects in the progressive majority, primarily due to their position, to the prior select board's position on fiscal management. Since interim superintendent Phelan left 12 years ago, the town has had one override. For a town with Milton's revenue base, the override last year was well overdue, and we now know that the number was insufficient. After listening to the select board and school committee, financial committee meetings, it has become quite clear to me that the proposed cuts are optional. The select board has provided sufficient money to close the budget gap. Town funding for both the circuit breaker and special education reserve are technically optional. In prior years, when there's been a budget deficit, even in the middle of the year, the select board has provided the emergency funding needed. I've not had them tell me no once. That extra bus we had was because the select board gave it to us. If you insist on building these reserves, your time horizon is also flexible, which leads me to the essential question. Why would you initially propose such aggressive cuts that target our most vulnerable student populations? As member Carol mentioned, Milton families are exhausted with fighting for our schools and what little staff we've been able to hobble together to meet the needs of our students over the last 5 years. Interim Superintendent Phelan will tell you, when he was here, we didn't have all these coaches. We didn't have all these student supports. It was a bare bones district. And every year through negotiation, we added more staff and more staff and more staff. For a district that has a chronic deficit, it's a miracle how we've grown. The initial proposed cuts are a conscious decision to eliminate the equity department, a department that was never truly provided with the support, authority, and autonomy to be successful beyond complying with the state mandate to hire a restorative justice coach. I'm grateful that you all acknowledge that progress has not been made, but we actually have to do more than talk about it. We actually have to do something about it. Interim Superintendent Phelan says he's prioritizing those who are not student-facing in terms of the cuts. But as we all know, that for some students, the staff on this list are what makes their learning environments possible, because they motivate students to stay in school and make them feel valuable in order to be successful in what can be a very hostile environment. After Interim Superintendent Phelan is gone at the end of the school year, we are setting the next superintendent up for failure by having a community that no longer has confidence in our work and our ability to solve our problems without it being a fiscal nightmare and trying to lay people off at every opportunity when it may not be required.
If you could wrap up your comments for time.
When Milton finally adopts the MA DESE new teacher evaluation instrument that was made available 2 years ago and includes the demonstration of equitable teaching practices, you will need the staff in the DEIB department, all 3 positions, to provide the professional development, evaluation, and the follow-up work necessary to prepare all of our teachers to be successful. I highly recommend that you reconsider these decimating cuts. You should maintain the full-time DEIB director position, as well as the equity coach for our students, teachers, and community. Thank you.
had written their name down to speak. We will be having the public budget forum on March 11th. You are also welcome to send us emails or comments. If we didn't get to you, we apologize for that. But thank you for taking the time and thank you for sharing your comments. It's always appreciated. We will now move on to the next item, which is the superintendent's report.
So before we start the superintendent's report, I would like to start by asking a very patient Milton High School senior, Elias Karras, to come up to represent the student representative program we have with the school committee in Milton High. Elias, as you know, is a senior, fourth term student representative at Milton High, class of 2026. He's been in front of us before, and we have welcomed him back to share all the good stuff that's happening at Milton High School. Welcome.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here and to share a little bit about Milton High School, the place we all know and love. I hope you are all doing well and you've gotten through this snowstorm. I think we're coming back, and I'm just so glad to see that. So some things about the high school. Now is the time when the course selection process for many of the students are they have to decide which courses are best suited for them based on their own goals and in themselves and what they would like to do during their time at Milton High School and beyond. So tomorrow, the 26th of February, that's the program of studies night at 6 p.m. In the high school auditorium. And then on the 9th of March, the course recommendations will be released. So again, as I've said, this is a very important time for my peers to decide which course is best for them. And as for me, as a student myself, I can speak to the diversity and the wonderful offerings of the courses, anything from dystopian literature to woodworking to visual arts and music. It's just truly wonderful to experience that, and I'm very grateful for it. I believe it has set all of us up for success. And then, in addition, our competitive student organizations have recently won some awards in the past few weeks. The math team, they've qualified for the Southern Massachusetts Math League playoffs. The dance team, they got second place at the Universal Dance Association Regional Competition at Endicott College. The MHS Science Olympiad team, they just competed at Harvard University and they proudly placed 37th. And Model UN, they've participated in both Harvard and Boston University conferences, and several members have received recognition. And all of these achievements speak to our drive as a student body. We're very passionate and we care about many different things and interests, and we are truly grateful for all of you as a school committee for supporting us and all of our teachers and administrators. It's truly you who give us all of these opportunities and make them possible. And then furthermore, the Music of Our Schools Month is March, so we're hosting 4 concerts for our music ensembles, plus a music discovery night for the younger ones, the elementary school students, so that they can be exposed to an instrument early, like we all were, to continue this wonderful program. In I think it's just so great to make the arts and our talents accessible to the community at large, and to open these concerts and host them for the public. I think it's truly a great achievement. So props to the music department on that. And then our Sweetheart Dance has been postponed, unfortunately, due to a lack of interest. I would like to recognize the families who made fantastic contributions in terms of the decorations and whatnot to host a great event. And those contributions will be reused for the next event, which is going to be probably later in March. And then we will meet as a small group again with Member Bao and Superintendent Phelan, just so we can discuss how as a small group we can better support the needs of the school committee and the district at large. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share.
Thank you,
Thank
Elias.
you. Appreciate it.
You checked a lot of things off my highlight box, and now I myself. And what an amazing run for you as a senior who doesn't have to fill out a program of studies schedule for next year, because you'll be graduating, and your passion for the arts and your passion for Milton High always comes through, Elias, and I truly appreciate your that you bring your authentic self here every meeting and share what's going on at the high school. It's really great, so thank you.
Thank you, I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good
Have
night.
a good night. Thanks for
Thank you for
sticking
your
around.
patience, buddy, yeah. I'm just gonna read some highlights that feel like it's too much information to share on a long night like tonight. I wanted to mention a couple of big picture issues that are going on in dates for the district. Very important, as Elias just pointed out, Program of Studies Night is tomorrow night for all of our families to take part. There was a course of studies night in the fall that I attended, and this is a second event that talks about the teaching and learning at the high school. It is consistent in parallel to the students filling out their course selection sheets, and also consistent with something that Mark and I were talking about earlier, which is the discussions that are happening throughout the school in the month of January related to AP and honors in classes that students might want to think about taking and getting some support for them. The opening night for MHS Theater Winter Festival is the 27th of February. March 3 next week is a full PD day. I want to let the community know that we did think about changing that to a student day, given the break in February and then the 2 snow days, but the logistics of it weren't able to be, worked through in a short period of time, but we did think about changing that. We did get some parent emails, we did respond to those emails, but we're not able to execute on that. So it will be a PD next Tuesday, the 3rd. We thank everybody for being involved and Carla leading that work. March 10th is Strings Concert at MHS at 6:30. March 11th is School Committee and Open Public Hearing on Budget here at the fire station. And March 18 is our annual Grade 1 Information Night. All of the great things that are happening at the high school were said by Elias. I have 4 or 5 at the middle school, but I'm going to just pick one, which is congratulations to our peer students who, along with Milton High students, traveled to Abington High in a month, over the course of the last month, to audition for junior and senior SEMSBA. We are thrilled to have 28 of our high school and peer musicians accepted to the festival. At Glover, we had a future problem-solving grade 5 team that competed in a qualifying round in the Future Problem Solving Nationals, which is a really great competition. The results will be in soon. We're very proud of our scholars that are led by Colleen Martin and Capril Cassidy. At the Collycott, we had a great read aloud day. I think some people here were at that group. I know folks at the table were reading at the Collycott. It was a great morning. They also had a great robotics night, and the Collycott as well as the Glover are participating in certain activities this month for Black History Month that are happening this week. The Cunningham also had a great day and a great showing for the future problem solvers. And also they celebrated the 100th day of school this year for 5th grade. So 5th graders had 1,000 days of school. That's what they celebrated. Tucker has several good news stories, one of which is the Tucker Art Show is from March 12 from 6 p.m. Jess Galuli, who's our art teacher, is hard at work to make that display that amazing artwork in the hallways of Tucker. And the Black History Month assemblies will take place Friday in strong partnership with the PTO and the DEIB committees at the Tucker as well. And the athletic update, this is playoff season. This afternoon was girls basketball, tonight is girls hockey, tomorrow is boys hockey, Friday night is boys basketball. We have male and female wrestlers who are wrestling in the state championships out in Springfield over the weekend. We have, what else did we miss? Indoor track won the Division III state title. And we did wrestling, and the ski team has a big meet tomorrow out at Mount Wachusett. So in the fall, we had almost every fall team make post-tournament work. And I think we're almost there with the spring, the winter as well. So as Elias says, a lot of good clubs, a lot of good access to a lot of great things at the high school. And the athletics and the dance and the theater and the music are all to be celebrated. So that's a quick update across the 6 schools.
Great, thank you.
Guys in the back, but do we have a hockey update? I think we got booted tonight on MATV for the hockey game.
The girl.
I think they booted.
Oh, I'm sure they did. So the girls' team ranked second in the state in the seedings. And they play a team tonight that I think that they should do pretty well against. The boys' team seeded high. And hockey as well. Is it on behind me? Are they all watching it?
They won.
And they won. We're hoping girls basketball won this afternoon, and they did. That's fantastic. And boys, everybody had a home game, which is great for the fans to be able to go to. And yeah, it's just all good stuff. And for the sports, you don't see that often. The wrestling matches have been fantastic this year. And so girls hockey, boys hockey, girls basketball, all good stuff. So congratulations to our coaches and our student athletes and our students who participate in music and drama, et cetera.
Excellent. Are we doing the program of studies?
I know Mark had a couple of quick questions, but we presented on the program of studies at our last meeting. That was the first run-through for our curriculum advisory committee. We will actually ask the curriculum advisory committee to get together next week to talk about our early literacy program that they're coming to close on. We had a meeting today with Kat DeRoche, now Kat Young, about they've made a selection for curriculum. It's a unanimous decision. We thought we'd run the decision by the advisory group and then present it to the full school committee on the 11th. There'll be a process discussion that night. We also have some numbers for budgeting that have all been taken care of by Katie for this year and for next year. Already built into our budget, so we are very happy. I'll give a hook to make people come back to the next meeting. We have a wonderful DESE curriculum that is approved for reading and literature and early literacy for our elementary teachers that we'll engage in a 5-year agreement with this curriculum company that our families have been asking for years. Kat DeRoche has led a team of wonderful educators to come up with the selection process. This is something that I think families have been coming to this board for a long period of time, and we feel this, along with our current, I'm gonna lose the name of it, we see it. Our,
Sounds like.
the phonics program.
Oh, you fly.
Between UFly and this new early literacy material, we certainly feel excited about what's gonna come forward for success for all of our early readers and writers at the elementary level. So this is good stuff for the district the parents have waited a long time for. That will be pushed off to March 11th. So if we want to take a vote, Val, thank you for representing the group 2 weeks ago. Karen Cahill's not here tonight, so if we wanted to vote that, we certainly could.
Did you have questions about?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they can be answered tonight. I think my questions came from just around the process for the enrollment in course, right, which Karen shared last time around requiring a teacher recommendation and just questions on that barrier. I think I've had some conversations with families who've gone through that process, who just expressed from their experience that that felt like a barrier, right? It did not feel quite as easy as maybe again where the intention was for that to be, and that it felt like a barrier that prevented entry to higher level coursework. And so when again, it could be that that's just those few parents' experience. Maybe it's not a systematic thing, but I maybe wonder just what is the goal of the recommendation, right? Is this a student-driven kind of process versus an adult-driven process? And so it's I think very reasonable to say that teachers should, have really good insight into students' academic prowess and provide feedback to the kids and have adult conversations around this is how you're doing and this is where I see you kind of going. I don't personally think that that should be a barrier to entry if the kid says, okay, I hear you, I still want to try this course. And again, I know the statement is that it's not that they can get the kind of waiver, and that all the waivers are granted. I just wonder if that step is even necessary, right? Like if the student disagrees, can't they just enroll in the course without going through these other hurdles, again, given some of the feedback I had heard. So that was one of the questions I had, was just like what actually are the exact steps that families need to go through, and are all those steps necessary, and all those steps designed really to support students, or are they kind of procedural hurdles that might inhibit students' willingness to take higher level coursework? That was one of my questions, and then the other was kind of data around that, which was connected to kind of the equity audit and some of the conversation that came up here, which just historical issues of course access for students of color specifically, and so just where does that data stand currently? I think that would be interesting data to that first conversation I was having of like, is this actually showing up as a barrier? Do we see that in the courses, not just within AP enrollment, but the difference between the college prep coursework versus honors courses, and just like where are our students falling, and is it representative across the different subjects? Are there places that we're concerned? The data is like flagging that there's a concern we should look at. I hope the data is there's no concern that we're having great access and for all students. Those were my questions related to the course of studies conversation.
As far as, I appreciate the questions. I think those are good conversations for us to have. In reviewing the course of study and understanding the need to vote it so that plans can be put in place, and obviously students know really the changes that were presented to us regarding new courses being added, changed, like that is important information to get settled soon. So I'm wondering, as I look through the course of study, program of study, document, I don't actually see the procedures regarding the process of teacher recommendation and whatnot. Like, I don't actually see that detailed within the program of study document. I think that's my understanding is that's an accompanying procedure that is sort of how decisions have tended to get made and currently are being made. There is an acknowledgement on page 7, at the top of page 7 of the working copy of the program of studies, a sort of a disclaimer statement. Milton High School reserves the right to schedule students based on course enrollment, conflicts, graduation requirements, staffing, and other relevant considerations. But a lot of the communication in the principal's message, as well as in the leveling guidelines, the section on deciding what to take, it's really, I see emphasis on the family and the student sort of carefully thinking through what they are interested in and their different factors. So I guess that's all a long way to say, Mark, like, would it be possible to vote the program of study with the updates that have been presented while kind of continuing the track of conversation about, which probably maybe should be a conversation within the curriculum advisory committee. Maybe more conversation with Principal Cahill. I'm not sure, but I'm wondering if those are like mutually exclusive, because I don't actually see like hard and fast prescriptive language within this document that we're being asked to vote that really pertains to what the important questions that you're raising.
Yeah, I get that. I think the only specific language is in the section you're talking about where it says parents and guardians, students are required to discuss level recommendations with your child's teacher before requesting level changes. So that required meeting is one of the steps, obviously, and so that's the one piece that is in there. Again, I understand they have a program of study thing tomorrow, and so like having some clarity for the kids in that presentation is really important, and so I'm not suggesting necessarily that we hold this up. I think this gets the larger issue that I have at times with, potentially just my own engagement in this board of like, I feel like I bring up stuff and it's just like a little too late, right? We talked about this similar with like graduation stuff where I tried to bring it up last year and it's like, oh no, you're too late, and then I feel like it happened again. So
Yeah, that's fair.
So, and to the point, like these are, if there are issues with access for any student, but especially our most vulnerable students and students who have historically been marginalized and been kept out of these types of courses, that is urgent. That's obviously like urgent work that I think all of us know and agree. And so I'm happy to, again, from a process perspective, say we need to provide these program studies. I don't have a problem with any of the course changes that the principal presented. I think that all made sense and sounds fine in terms of those tweaks. So it is a larger conversation, I think, beyond that. But just wanted to raise those concerns while we were talking about this and hoping, there are just so many things that pull our attention to at any time. And so I think in 2 weeks, be budget focused and then something else could pop up and that will lose the thread. And again, I've just heard from, I don't have kids in the high school, so I've not gone through it myself, but I've just heard from multiple parents, both of students of color and of non-students of color. They just felt like this has been, there has felt like barriers to entry to some of these courses, and so I tend to see that.
I'm curious though, like, I mean, I know this is kind of separate and we have to vote on it, but I'm curious though with what you were talking about, having access, right? Is that somehow connected to increasing rigor at the middle school, right? Like, I think that's something that, because it's a big jump between middle and high school, is there a fear of, hey, you're doing fine in these classes, but this might be hard for you to do, so I might not recommend you to that. So how do we kind of create like, a little bit more a seamless process to get there so that students, when they get there, like even, or parents to say like, oh gosh, this might be too hard for my kid, he's already, or she's already struggling. So how do we kind of bridge that gap so more students, are interested in taking these harder courses and more students of color, for instance, going into, having access to AP? Like, how do we kind of build up that rigor? And like I was telling you the examples of like introducing the SAT vocabulary words, like how do we start that? Like thinking at that level so that they can be better prepared when they get to 9th grade, and I'll be there tomorrow. But kind of getting to that process and saying, okay, I really want to take this because I feel like I can do it, and really advocating. And I agree what you're saying, the hurdles, but I also feel like when a student advocates for that and they're like almost, they want to do it and they want to put in that work, and it almost sets them up for success when they get to that class because they're willing to go that extra step, which is what's required in those classes. So I do kind of appreciate that. It shouldn't just be like, they need to work for it, right? And that because they have to work hard in that class. So I do understand that process, but if there is a way to streamline so there is more exposure to that level of work early on, would kids naturally go in that direction? I don't know, just.
That's the tier 1 focus, right? Yeah.
So a couple of quick things. One, we have Bill Fish coming in 2 meetings to talk about the 8 to 9 transition committee that he put together, to talk about academic rigor and meeting that from 8th grade to 9th grade. That's already been established. That committee's been meeting. So he'll report out on what his process looks like and how he wants to move that work forward. The program of studies vote tonight, to Mark's point and Lindsay's point, I think we should take it, settle it, because everybody's going tomorrow night to explore it, and students are actively trying to look at courses and take those for the fall, and that window of time is now. There are definitely several practices that are happening at the high school related to access that I think are good news stories, and but I won't bother doing those tonight. If we feel like we want to talk to Karen and Jenny Bellevue, who's the head of guidance at SEL, to just talk about what that process looks like. We do not have one high school parent here, right? So you haven't been through it. I want to let you know that there is an AP at every January was AP month, where every student got exposed to what AP English looks like, what AP Psych looks like, what the work level looks like. We have student AP ambassadors that actually explain it in 18-year-old language and not 35-year-old teacher language. We have the ability for parents to understand the program of studies back in the fall, so they're ready for that. We have a lot of parents that are coming up from 8th grade. They should be going to that meeting so they can get ready for what they want to take in 9th grade, because that does help set you up for 10th, 11th, and 12th for higher level courses. We are going to engage in SAT and PSAT. PSAT will be paid for by the district next year. That's a past practice that we did that we left in recent years, so every child takes PSAT. PSAT now will give you recommendations for every single child based on their scores and their correct answers and their incorrect answers, to decide, to give you a feedback sheet that every student will get, that guidance could sit with them and say, well, you have strengths in writing or you have strengths in aptitude in math. That should guide your decisions on what you might want to pursue for advanced placement or higher level courses, because you're good at it, and this shows that. So there's a lot of steps being taken, and I think that if we want to make sure we can shine a better light on that for families to know and understand. But what I said at the beginning of this process is everybody should read the program of studies before we start, because it's a thick document, and I'll always quote Elias now, he's my good buddy. There's a whole lot of good stuff in that program of studies. The offerings in business and in different areas is great. So we can certainly talk to Karen and Jenny about coming up with either a set of slides or a conversation with the advisory curriculum committee. And I think that this is an issue that we will be also talking with our CDM and Mark about in March. We'll be talking about the AP participation in outcome rates for all of our students. So this work happens every day. But if we want to talk about it further, and we all as a committee and through the chair want me to explore it formally, I can do that at the chair's request.
Sounds good. Because I don't want that to get lost, because I know that there are questions that you brought up, and I think a lot of it does even tie into some of the things that you were talking about earlier with, the DEIB conversations. Is there, is there bias training around, talking to students about courses, encouraging certain students to take courses? I think that all of that should be part of the conversation. So I think if there's data to explore, I think that would be helpful if people have that. But I also think we should vote on it tonight. So do both. But Mark, I really appreciate you bringing it up, and I appreciate the questions around it. And I think the data is important, and that, even if it doesn't impact this immediate, starting a conversation now and so that it doesn't get lost, I think it's important. So I will make a motion to approve the Milton High School 2026-2027 program of studies. All those in favor? Great. Do you want to report on vendor warrants to report on?
Did I sign 32? I'm not getting the emails. This is where we miss
Do you want to hold on?
scale. I know I signed one,
We have one here, I think.
and we didn't vote on anything at the last meeting, so maybe 32 is the one, but I usually go back and double check that what's been emailed to me in terms of copies, and that one I can't see. But I know, again, I've signed one right before February break, so I assume that is 32.
We don't have to vote on.
double check and
Sorry.
double check the amount, so.
I should ask before the start of this meeting.
We'll hold off on that.
You sure that's not gonna mess you up? Okay.
The other vote that we have is to approve the minutes from the February 4th meeting. Everybody had a chance to review those. So I'll take a motion to approve them.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from our meeting on February 4th, 2026.
Second.
All those in favor? Um, we have two things left. One, we have just looking at the March 11th meeting agenda items. So we have the open public budget hearing, FY27 discussion. We have the preliminary approval of the Milton High School trip to Europe. We have the early literacy initiative update, community schools FY27 fee increase discussion and vote. And then the subcommittee report update, so we will have finance, policy, facilities, because we're meeting on Tuesday, and school building committee.
School, yeah.
All right.
I can follow up with you, but I believe I had postponed the capital final update. So I can do that, it will be very short.
And then the last thing, I just moved to the chair's report to the end. As I've shared with all of you and I've shared with John, and now the community is aware and the select board voted on it, I just wanted to, I guess officially state that I have sent in my resignation from the school committee effective April 29th. I will finish out this year, but I will not be finishing out my term for personal reasons. There is absolutely, it is not reflective at all of this school committee. I have been so fortunate to work with all of you. I appreciate the respect that we give one another. I appreciate the ability for people to share their thoughts and opinions. I truly appreciate the passion that everybody brings. So I feel very, very lucky to have been able to do this for 2 years. I also feel extremely fortunate that I got to jump into the chair position and got to work with John. He's made it really easy to step into this, and I've appreciated your guidance throughout it. I've learned a lot. And then Katie and Carla, I've really enjoyed working with you. Katie, we've been in a lot of meetings together, but I think you all have such tremendous talent, and the district is really lucky to be working with you. So it's very bittersweet. I appreciate all the kind words that you guys shared, except Mark. No, I'm just kidding. And I just wanted to officially say it here. It was as I said, it was voted by the select board to put the remainder of my term on the ballot this year, so somebody can run for the 1-year position. And that's it. So thank you all. I really appreciate it. And to the community, it's a great invested, as we saw tonight, passionate community to work for. And I would rather walk into a meeting with every seat filled than every seat empty, because it just says that people are engaged and they care. So that's all I have to say on that. So thank you all. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for your service.
Thanks.
Sorry,
Glad
Nathan
we
scared
have
you
you
off.
for a few
It was Nathan.
It was Nathan.
minutes, a
Yeah,
few more meetings.
4 more meetings, yeah, yes. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? We're adjourned. Thank you.